hope you guys are enjoying my nice little background. Had a service call that ran late, and I'm sitting in Central Park doing this call, kind of relaxing, enjoying a gorgeous day here in New York.
Well, just if we start telling you behind you, and you start running.
Appreciate the warning. Thank you.
We got your 6.
On this show, we're going to have 3 wonderful guests talking about a bunch of stories. 3 of them to choose from are going to be Brinks Home Security and their bankruptcy notification, a tech show for potential consumers in Orange County, California, and one you probably shouldn't miss, employee on-the-job marijuana usage. Be sure to follow us on episode 381 here on ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
This is ResiWeek, episode 381, Half-Baked AV. This is ResiWeek, your guide to all things AV in the residential space. As you can tell, I am neither Tim Albright nor Matt Scott here. It's Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa. I am pitching in for Matt today, seeing as he is taking the day off for some obscure Canadian holiday. So, of course, the Americans, and me in particular, immigrants, we get the job done. Uncle Richie here. We've got a couple of stories here, and I am fortunate to have 3 guests. I've got an old friend here, a recent friend that I've made during the course of interviewing them, and a brand new friend. So I'm going to start with an old friend who I haven't seen in a while. Mark Feinberg is here. Mark is the CEO of Home Theater Advisors. Mark, it's good to see you, brother.
Hey, good to see you, Richie. I hope you guys are enjoying my nice little background. Had a service call that ran late, and I'm sitting in Central Park doing this call, kind of relaxing, enjoying a gorgeous day here in New York.
Next on the list is somebody who I've had the pleasure of seeing on 2 different continents. I've had a chance to interview him both at Infocom and at ISE. I am speaking to Frank Santos, who is the Director of Training at Vanco International. Frank, it's good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you, and happy to be here. Good to see you virtually again.
Exactly. Here we go. Back to screens and windows on the screen again. So coming in, I guess, from warm Chicago areas, you've told me.
It's getting warmer. We're finally in the 80s. Yep.
And brand new, and taking my first chance to interview, but I've heard many things about him, and we'll talk a little bit about his company and what he does a little bit further on. But I'd like to introduce Dave Chace, who is the president of Cogent 360, and we'll talk a little bit about Cogent in a sec. But Dave, it's good to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Rich. Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right.
Here in sunny Pennsylvania. I'm not in Central Park, but there are trees outside my window, so that sort of counts.
Well, we've got all the time zones covered then, it looks like, so we're looking good. We're going to get straight into it. Potentially, this is a story that we'll be hearing more about in the future, or maybe it winds up being a one-off, but our first story comes to us from CE Pro. Brinks Home Security parent, Monotronics, files for bankruptcy. Beginning of the story tells us Monotronics International files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for approximately $500 million in debt. It is the company's second restructuring since 2019. So I'd say let's go ahead, Dave. I'm just going to kick it to you. Is this a canary in a coal mine? Is this something that we should be concerned about in the CI space? As the economy is potentially shifting, that we should be more aware of in terms of the dealers and manufacturers and even consumers?
Well, yeah, it's obviously anytime you have a well-known established company that's, in big trouble, it's always a big warning sign. And, now I think the tenor among the public is that of always, suspicion and caution. And you hear about all these new things going on and there's trepidation out there. And how could this potentially impact the rest of the industry? Will it be just a one-off? Will it be a ripple effect? Much like, when the bank went under out there in San Francisco a while back, was that a bellwether of what's to come? So I think people are going to be watching very carefully what happens from here. I think the other guys can speak even more to how that can impact the technology side of systems that have already been installed and so on. But yeah, I think, we're going to talk later on, I think, as far as the connection between the industry and the consumer and how much the consumer really is plugged into the industry. I wouldn't worry tremendously right off the bat, but if it becomes a trend, I think there's a lot to be concerned about there.
So Frank, coming from the manufacturer side, even though you're on the training side, but from the manufacturer side, does news like this worry in terms of how consumer confidence would be seen towards manufacturers? Because again, this is not necessarily the AV side of what you do, but it is affiliated in some sense. And so does that nervousness, is that something that manufacturers take a look at that point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's you're right in terms of AV and security. It's kind of meshing together over the past couple of years or so. So news like this, absolutely, it's a concern. But you got to take this with a grain of salt because it is the second time, obviously, this company is doing this. So you've got to take a look at their history, right? But as Dave said, yes, it's a concern. Obviously, industry wide, everyone's talking about the interest rates being high, so that's a concern. And the concern is that the economy is going to be going lower than it is now, right? It's going to keep on decreasing, if you will. So on a manufacturing standpoint, obviously our product development director could answer that better than I, but I'm certainly seeing it on our side. I couldn't tell you from the shows, though. The limited number of shows that I've been to, we thought it would be a slower outcome in terms of the audience coming out, and that's been the opposite in my limited shows that I've attended this year. So, but to answer your question, absolutely, it is a concern.
So I'm going to read a little snippet from here before I get to you, Mark, just so you get an idea. But Monitronics, which monitors more than 800,000 alarm accounts, has received for approximately $387 in new money financing during Chapter 11 cases from existing lenders, including $90 million. They are basically looking to refund. The people who were part of the first version are back in on the second version. And again, obviously, Mark, your company, Home Theater Advisors, you're not a security company, but you're in a lot of installations where obviously a security system is going to be involved. How do you necessarily, as your company, deal with, say, it is one of the 800,000 accounts that has been affected by this, and you're coming in as the technology person? You're not necessarily going to be beholden to the security side of things, but when end users start asking you questions, how do you deal with that from the CI side? Because this is something dealers are going to wonder, going, "Hey, what do I say when a situation like this comes up?"
Right, and for me, it's honestly, not the security, not this particular company. I haven't even come across them in the past. It's more the concern of if this starts to resonate throughout the industry and customers start to ask the question, well, I just saw this company's going bankrupt. What does that mean for all the products you're installing? What about, I haven't heard of Snap AV. I haven't heard of Sonance myself. Like, these seem like small companies to me. What happens if they fail? So it really raises that red flag to them of, there's possibility of the product becoming obsolete faster than you would normally expect if the company fails and you're relying on their servers and their backbone for things to operate properly. And I mean, I have to be honest, I say that's always a risk.
One of the things that I am going to do, because again, like I said, when this is a story, hopefully that we won't be hearing about for the third time, we're going to jump into the next part. So this is an interesting one. I know that we're going to have quite a few opinions about how this comes together. So this next story comes to us from Residential Systems, titled "A Tech Show for Potential Clients." Mark Sikchowski, the man behind the industry's technology and business summits, is looking to introduce a consumer-facing event for the CI market. This new event is going to be called Home Tech Expo, planned in fall of 2024 in Orange County, California, where, quote, he looks to shine a spotlight on the industry and educates consumers not only on what they do, but how they can be a part of it. So, a big part about Mark is that he's been in the channel for a while. We know that. He was the one who started out with Sonance, had a rep firm, but was the creator of the Technology and Business Summits, which was later sold to Cedia in 2018. And so that I do know that a couple of vendors and CI dealers and people have attended these summits. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Dave, basically a trade show. Are we looking at kind of like the county fair pavilion where people come in and take a look at model railroads and then get a hot tub and then they meet CI dealers?
I hope it's a little bit more evolved than that, but I got to tell you, I applaud the idea. I think it's terrific. I'm hoping it's executed at a very high level. I think there is absolutely a disconnect between the consumer and the industry as far as does the average homeowner know what is actually possible in their home. I think you've got a bunch of houses out there who've got 9 different smart devices in their house. I've got Alexa, but I may have a doorbell. I may have a security camera. They're all hooked up to different clouds or all these different things. And, if they can actually really be exposed to what's possible in their home and how it can all be done, not only effectively, but cost efficiently, and get a real sense of a customer journey and learn what can happen in their home. Much like if you go to a high-end home show, a really well-done home show, they're packed with people because people love spending money on their homes. And this is a part of the home industry that I think has been really, really underserved. You go to Cedia and, it's a very, close community. Everyone knows each other and they're excited about the new developments and so on. But how well are we really communicating that to the homeowners? And once the homeowners can see firsthand what's possible, I think it's a terrific potential. I'm excited about the idea.
Well, I'm going to take a second. I had mentioned earlier that a little bit about your company because you've got, you're kind of positioned in the market, in an interesting side between kind of the dealers and the front end side and manufacturers and everything else. And part of the services you offer is trade show work and booth design.
To an extent, yeah, we do a lot of work in the virtual space. We can create, extremely realistic virtual spaces where manufacturers can showcase all the different products and people can move around in what looks like a completely real 360-degree environment, but click and learn about the products and so on. But the founding principle at the heart of it all is education. And how do we educate our audience? In this case, consumers, ideally, the people who ultimately spend the money. How do we educate them about what's possible in their home? And while we can do it, we focus on the virtual side, doing all different virtual smart homes and expo booths and things. Here's a live event that I think could, go a long way to providing, a tremendous service to the community and really help our industry because people are going to start realizing, oh, I didn't know we could do this. I didn't know this was possible. I'd never thought of that. And all the things that, really high quality integrators are trying to do every time they meet with a potential client. Let me give you a real customer journey. Let me expose you to what's possible in your home. And when they see that, suddenly, the whole picture of what they want to do changes dramatically in some cases.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about this and that, if you were to advise dealers or manufacturers who are going to be, attending this. So, let me just kind of give you the parameters of what they're talking about. So when they're talking about building the expo, they are going to try to build it similar to what they've got at the summits in the past, where there'll be an exhibit floor with 10 by 10, 10 by 20, 10 by 30, 10 by 40, and 20 by 20 booths. And they're kind of doing an all-in, where instead of, the traditional trade show view where you kind of get your floor space and then you kind of figure it out as you go, they're looking at providing kind of an all-in package to begin with where, they get their drapes, they get basic Wi-Fi, they're basically establishing it so that you can walk in and do your thing. What would your advice be for, say, if it was a dealer who wanted to go ahead and show his wares in Orange County or a manufacturer, what would you advise them to do with that space for that impact to the end user? Because again, keep in mind, this is an end user facing show as opposed to a CI dealer facing show.
The singular piece of advice I would provide is don't make it about the product. Make it about the experience your products provide. It's not a business-to-business trade show where if you go to Cedia, you're learning all about Model X and Model Y and Model Z and the differences and so on. The consumer is not so much concerned about that. It's show them what you can do. If you have this, let's say a lighting control system, right, or a whole house automation system, what types of conveniences and peace of mind and security elements does this bring to the table? How can this enhance your life? Not about the specifics of the box that makes it work. So, people want to think about when they go home and they think about what they learned, you want to, have them seeing pictures in their mind of like incredible lighting and, and security and shades and how it enhances the environment, how I can feel more secure in my home and so on. Not about model XYZ.
That's great info. Frank, I'm going to kick it to you from the manufacturer side. As the director of training, you've got one job, which is to work with dealers to best how to showcase a product, in this case, Vanco product. But this is obviously going to be kind of near and dear to your heart, where this is, obviously a trade show to be able to, for any manufacturer, to show off what they're capable of. But this is a huge twist because, again, Infocom, CEDIA, the trade summits, ISE, those are not consumer shows. Those are right down and dirty technical. People come in, they're looking at the cut sheets. They're going to want to talk to engineers. They want to find out how the sausage is made. That is a completely different experience than a consumer-facing show. How does a manufacturer, if they're going to get involved, how do they adjust their message in order to make it an impact? Because again, it's from an industry standpoint, we all know who Vanco is, in the CI market and the commercial market. But say a consumer who it just, again, they might know, something they've seen on TV ad, but they may not have heard of Vanco. How are you going to how would a manufacturer raise that kind of awareness and separate themselves?
I think a couple of things. Obviously, with consumers, there's two things that you can do. Number one, you can make it stupid simple, and you need to. Obviously, at these CEDIA shows, at these Infocom shows, we're dealing with integrators, right? So we've got to be very technical. We've got to show them specifications. Obviously, definitely about the experience, but you got to make it really simple for an end user and showcase how easy it is to integrate this technology into their own home, how they can experience it, right? The other thing is, in a booth like that, in my opinion, less is more. So Dave is absolutely right. You don't want to show them black boxes on a shelf. You want to put something on the wall that's going to grab their attention. So you got to work with the technology that you have. Right now with us, we have a plethora of products encompassing 6 different brands. So would I show them batteries or surge protectors? Absolutely not. A black box? Absolutely not. Something like our video bar for a conference room? Sure, maybe, absolutely. Cables, absolutely not. So you've got to work with technology that's going to come and grab their attention right off the bat. And again, less is more. I would put one product on a wall that's going to grab their attention as they come in.
All right. An interesting part about this show, and one of the things that I noticed is that this is being positioned not only as a manufacturer show, but also dealers as well. He is looking to invite regional CI companies to be able to present themselves and their skill sets. So now, again, this is potentially the first one, but if it moves, and this is on the West Coast in Orange County, but say it does take off, and again, in the same way that the technology summits became regional events, it's not out of question for this to become an event on the East Coast, an event somewhere in the Midwest. Coming from your view, Mark, like as a dealer, if you were presented with an opportunity in your area to attend and present at a consumer facing show, how would you do it? Or if dealers are looking to go into this event, what would your advice be? What would you see as something that would be useful to make the most out of this show?
I think it's similar to Frank and Dave said. It's got to be something attention grabbing. It's got to be more like a vignette style than a wall of product. They don't need to see a 5-inch, a 6.5-inch, and an 8-inch speaker. They need to see a kitchen. What would that look like? Or what does a media room look like? Something like little vignettes, I think, is a great way to do it. We are talking homeowners and end users, so you got to have some swag for them to take. It's got to be there's got to be some branded goods there for them to have. Everybody wants a little bit of swag when they go to these trade shows. But I think it's got to be about the experience. Maybe something eye-catching and grabbing. I would be concerned. CEDIA can get loud with everyone competing on the volume of their systems. I would be a little concerned that could happen here as well. Everyone's trying to crank it up to attract people, but I would be surprised if that's what happens. Everyone's going to, turn it up to 11 to try and get people's attention playing some music.
Well, I guess the question too is, do we think that this is a direction that we should be going more towards? The CI market is obviously changing. You're seeing more and more, people are building experience centers. They're getting away from the traditional, retail shopping experiences. We're seeing brick and mortars are, from the larger manufacturers are, reducing their floor print space, and you're seeing less electronics and more white goods, or it's kind of an interesting wave of where the industry is going. Dave, do you see this as something that's going to continue? Do you see that this might be a one-off? What do you feel would be, is this something that makes sense for the industry? Is this something that everybody should be jumping onto? Or, do you double down with, staying with CDI and focusing on your experience centers or anything else? It's kind of an interesting crossroads, because you are changing your message significantly with the trade show like this.
You are, but I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think you have CDI, which serves the B2B, requirements where, okay, as a dealer, I need to know what the new products are. I need to know what the details are, what I could, and what I will be presenting to my customers going forward. The consumer show, I'd be really interested to see, what happens in the wake of this show. But yeah, I'd love to see it happen on a much wider basis. When the consumers are educated, I think that's what's lacking right now, is that we have an awful lot of industry education, but how great a job are we doing at educating the consumer about what they can do and what the possibilities are? And so, I wonder sometimes too, like you always see these local home shows popping up everywhere around every community. I wonder, because I haven't been to one in a while, how many of the local integrators actually are exhibiting at their local home show? Because just like looking for a new patio or a new, a new shower, well, what about music around the home? What about lighting? What about these things? And if I saw it, maybe I hadn't considered it when I first went to the show, but I saw this booth and this guy had this great demo and he told me all these different things I could do. And now I'm really excited about that. And so I just think the two serve two different needs, but can work very well in harmony. And if nothing else, maybe at CEDIA, if you expand this consumer experience and it takes hold, like I hope it will, maybe dealers will take more from that and understand better perhaps how to present what they do to consumers more effectively. That's because all we're doing is we're just trying to enlighten the consumer marketplace out there about what's great about the stuff that we sell and why they should want it. And so I would think that, if this thing really takes hold, it's going to do nothing but help the industry largely in a big way.
I think I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on that part for this story. And that's actually some pretty insightful information. Moving on, this was one that kind of came hot off the presses that caught our eye and is, I don't know if it's a forbidden topic. I think it's a topic that just doesn't get brought up a lot. We know that it is part of, everybody's personal, not everybody's, but some people's personal pursuits. But this comes to us from CE Pro from May 19th. And a pretty interesting headline. Employee on the job marijuana usage reaches 25-year highs. 7.3% of employees injured on the job were high on marijuana at the time, a 25-year high, while 4.6% of workers are commonly high. So, this is something that is becoming more of a story in that you do have employers, CI dealers, you have to be in residences or in businesses or in schools or in corporate situations where you have people who are physically on site. And there are, workplace norms, but also like they talk about workplace injuries and exposure. How do we deal with something like this in terms of addressing it with your staff and addressing the fact that as marijuana usage, although on a federal level isn't completely legal, on a state-by-state basis, they've gone from medical to recreational use. How do you have that conversation? How do you deal with kind of this brand new option of how free time is spent and what you can and cannot bring to the workspace. Mark, as an integrator and somebody who, like you said, you're out on a service call, how do you deal with this? How do you bring up this conversation?
Honestly, at this point, it's not that different than alcohol. I mean, alcohol is legal, marijuana is legal. There really is sort of no difference. If you wouldn't come to a job site drunk, you shouldn't come to a job site high. Now, unfortunately, I think there's still a different mentality around it somewhat. Even for example, in New York, you can walk down the street and smoke a joint and be smoking in public, but you can't be drinking in public. So, it seems like almost pot's getting even more accepted to some extent. But that discussion has to be had with your employees that, listen, guys, it's mind-altering substance. It's no different than drinking. I wouldn't accept it if you came here, reeking of beer. I won't accept it if you come here reeking a pot or having had a gummy or whatever. It's just got to be the way it is. I mean, I don't see much of a difference in the way you approach the two.
So, Frank, I'm gonna jump on over to you. Again, as a manufacturer, you guys aren't necessarily going to be in there, but how do the conversations happen in terms of making sure that obviously the first thing is workplace safety, but the other thing is that the trending, and Mark brought up a great point, right? The usage and the taboo of usage has changed. Is it just a matter of education and just kind of following the same rules with any other post-work activity that you treat it as, again, when you're in the workspace, safety is the first paramount concern?
Absolutely. First thing is, unfortunately, I'm not surprised by the headline, obviously. Second thing, Mark hit it right on the head. You treat it just like alcohol. That's exactly what I would have said. You follow the same guidelines. Obviously, in our warehouse back over here, we've got a ton of people back there in the warehouse, and they're driving forklifts. Same deal. You don't want a person who is drunk, obviously on alcohol, and you don't want a person who's high on marijuana, right? Because that could affect their skills to obviously drive that forklift, which raises a major concern. So I think you put that in hand. Obviously, there's a fine line between recreational and medicinal. And I understand that there's people out there who need marijuana to actually function normally. In fact, I've got a few friends who unfortunately do, and it's prescribed. So again, there is a fine line. Obviously, it is different than alcohol, but I think you treat the same in terms of the conversations and the guidelines. It's the same. You don't use it while under work conditions, right? Because it can be a hazard.
That is actually a pretty astute, again, I'm based in California on the West Coast, right? So I'm just saying, let them smoke, let them all smoke. We're all good, right? If we're all mellow, we're all happy to go. No, I'm just kidding. But Dave, again, you're in a different segment. I guess the biggest question is, are we making sure that we're treating alcohol the same as marijuana usage? Is that something that is, we treat it differently? Or is that something that if there is an infraction that becomes an issue? Or do we just say, hey, look, what you do in your off time is your off time. Just make sure you don't bring it to work, and, it's one of those conversations that you don't think that you should have, but sometimes you have to kind of lay it out and have a process in place so that it is dealt with before it becomes an issue. And again, like you said, it is a recreational use in some states. As long as you're in, again, this comes down to drug testing. This brings up the bigger question of, how do you deal with drug testing? Because are you dealing with it if it's a workplace incident? Or are you dealing with it if it's a condition to employment or not being employed? This is a completely different rule where, drug use rule was a whole lot different than alcohol use rule, where if you had a couple of glasses of wine after work, you're not going to take a breathalyzer test 2 hours later as you're conditioned for working. But the way the testing occurs in some workplaces, although it is either medically prescribed or it is recreationally used, are we opening up a can of worms here?
Look, as far as the legal side and the testing and all that, I can't speak too much to the whole legal aspect of it. What I would say, I run a business as well, and it's not one of those cases where we're out doing installations. It's a different kind of business. However, there's two things I would keep in mind. Number one, anytime you're having a conversation like that with an employee, make sure they're aware, like this is in no way, shape, or form a judgment of you. If you're somebody who wants to get high, look, you're fully entitled. If it's legal in the state, I'm not passing judgment on you whatsoever. What I'm saying, as the owner or the guy who runs this business, and when you are on the job, you are representing my company. You're a representative of this firm, and so as in that role, I have certain requirements. And if you don't feel comfortable meeting those requirements, that's your prerogative. But I don't need to employ you if that's the case. And so it's the rules of the game, and you can equate it to any one of a number of analogous situations, whether it's a uniform you have to wear in certain jobs or anything else. Like, listen, this is a requirement of the job, and I'm not passing judgment on you if you like to get high or don't. It's just that for a number of reasons, it's not permitted when you're on the job with my company, and either you can accept that or not. Simple as that.
Well, I think we will probably have more conversations coming up about something like this. I don't think we're going to see less of this conversation as potentially more states bring it along, because it's, we've got the federal side and then we've got the state by state side. And it is interesting because, like you said, it's you are representing the company. Mark, do you have any final thoughts on this one?
No. I mean, I agree with you. It's just going to be, it's not, we're not done with this yet. For some reason, I feel like there's just a different perspective. No one would dream. Very few people would dream of showing up to work drunk. For some reason, I feel like a lot of people, it's more okay to show up high, and I don't know why.
Well, I guess maybe we'll have that as part of the education track.
Exactly. Oh, there we go. A new CD class, how to deal with marijuana.
Step 1, don't show up high, right? So
definitely not the last we've heard of it. I mean, they're popping up all over the place. We just had one open up right by the house, and they're working on another one even closer by the house. So you're almost having the Starbucks effect with these dispensaries, where it's almost at each corner. So yeah, absolutely, we're going to have this discussion.
And I'm going to bring up actually just one thing that caught up, because generationally speaking, we have a brand new workforce that's coming in, right? We're past the millennials and the Gen Z, and marijuana usage for the generation is treated far differently than alcohol, honestly, in terms of the approach to it and the mood about it. Are we going to see a shift in terms of employees coming in who have a completely different viewpoint of that? I mean, is that something that we may have to deal with kind of in terms of relating to new employees, in terms of policy making? Is that something that we're concerned about in terms of even alienating a workforce?
I think it's certainly going to be a situation that employers are going to have to deal with. The newer generation coming in, coming out of school, or the younger folks this is maybe their first real deal job, so to speak. I mean, I've dealt with that in years past. A company that I used to work for, I was a director of product training. It was a big, nationwide retail outfit. And we'd have folks coming in for basic training, which was a multi-week process. So they'd be coming and staying in a hotel for weeks at a time. And for many of them, it was the first time, in this type of a situation. We'd have to give them really, hard conversations and lay out the rules. Like, this is what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And it's amazing, the stuff. We could go on and on about the stories of different trainees and what they would do during the time they're at the hotel, just because they're young, and a lot of them just, they weren't really grown up yet.
And if you think about a trade show, right? If you go to trade shows, after parties for trade shows, or when the show floor closes, what do they have? They have an open bar.
Not even after the show, on the show floor.
Is that something that, again, that kind of thinking forward as it becomes, part of the fabric, of how people unwind, is that something that we're going to have to be concerned with? Not that I plan on it showing up anytime soon, that you'll have a bud tender next to your bartender, but, is that something that, we might see happening as a shift when how people are spending their downtime at industry events?
I think it's a bit far-fetched right now to think about people smoking on a trade show floor, because I just don't think that's going to happen. The whole thing about smoking is secondhand smoke and all that. I'm not going to get secondhand beer unless I steal somebody's, and so I don't think that's going to be the case anytime soon. But as far as how far people take this and doing it on the job and so on, I don't know. I just think it's a matter, a large extent, of common sense. And that's, I think, as you get older, that's what you get better and better at, is understanding common sense. And so the younger folks often, it takes them a while to really grasp, the appropriate behavior sometimes. It's not just the young folks. I don't mean to, to stigmatize them, but listen, the more you're in a professional environment, the more I think you're going to understand common sense and what's right and what's, kind of outside the boundaries.
Well, Frank, I'm not going to paint you in a corner. I'm just going to let you nod sagely on the entire process, unless there's something you want to go ahead and provide.
In terms of marijuana use and shows now, and I think it's occurring now unofficially already. You hear stories, you see people, you can tell. Even on show floors, I've talked to dealers where I'm like, okay, you kind of smell of it, and you can tell. And it's that for me, I don't pass judgment on them. I mean, it's whether they're taking it recreationally or medicinally. It's some people do it, and I don't pass judgment on it. But it is happening on trade show floors at events unofficially. That's for sure. I
was at an event several years ago when it was recently legalized for recreational use, and sure enough, there was a manufacturer who had said, "Hey, come on, everybody, come on out." It was part of the celebration.
Yeah. And I was going to say the same thing. Like I saw that in Denver. I saw a lot of it off-site, and then in San Diego, I saw a lot of it off-site at those CEDIA cities. It's, and those are the only places it was really legal back then. Now it's, what is it? It's almost half. It's more than a third of the states. I think it's legalized. So you're going to see it a lot, and whether it's on the show floor or after the show, it's going to be there.
Well, I think it will be conversations that will continue to come up more. Yeah. It is. I think definitely a bit of a lightning rod of a conversation because it's kind of that tweener phase, and so. I do think that we will be having more conversations about this in the future. Gentlemen, thank you for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate all of your comments. I'm going to go ahead and go around the horn. Frank, if they want to find out more information or get in touch with you or find out more about Vanco International, how can they get in contact with you or find out more about Vanco?
Best way is the website. It is vanco1.com. And my email address is franks@vanco1.com. That's the best way to reach the company and myself. Feel free to reach out to me for any questions, any help that you need AV-wise.
Fantastic. Dave, thanks for being on. Appreciate all of your insight there. If people want to find out more about Cogent 360, how can they find you on the socials or your company? Where's the best place to find information about you and Cogent 360?
You can certainly check out the website, Cogent, COGENT 360.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn and the other social platforms. You can reach me at DChace, which is DCHACE, just to be difficult. It's Chace with a C. So DCHACE at Cogent360.com. And again, we do all kinds of training design and immersive and virtual environments. Virtual experience for a lot of the manufacturers, and we also have some stuff we do for dealers as well, so feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Well, Mark, thanks for being our correspondent in the field, and bringing us the wonderful outdoor and nature sounds during the interview. If they want to find out more about Home Theater Advisors or you in general, how can we find out more about both?
Best about Home Theater Advisors is hometheateradvisors.com or HT Advisors or Home Theater Advisors across the socials. And for me, it's mark@hometheateradvisors.com or at Mark Feinberg across most of my socials.
Fantastic. Well, 3 very interesting views. And gentlemen, thanks for making my job easy while I fit in for Matt. As far as Uncle Richie, hopefully the best place that you can find me would be on our suite of shows and the verticals that we cover here on AVNation.tv. But if not, you can obviously find me on the socials as well at R Fregosa on Twitter or FregosaDesign.com is the website for the company. Hopefully you'll also find me on our show with my partner, Steve Greenblatt, where we talk about the control side and automation side of the industry, where a state of control is where you can find us there. But that's all we have for us today. And so we're going to head on out. This is Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa, for ResiWeek for AVNation.tv.